Hello there. Welcome to the video tutorial for Noir. I'm Brad Talton, the designer for Noir, and I'm here to teach you how to play the game. Inside the game box, you'll find 25 of these suspect cards and 25 evidence cards. The suspect cards have a like front and like back. The evidence cards all have similar backs, but each front corresponds to one of the suspects on the table. Before each game, you'll want to shuffle up the evidence deck and array the suspects in this 25 card array, 5 wide and 5 tall. The first game we're going to play is Killer versus Inspector. On the rules cards, you'll see there's a number 1 Killer and number 1 Inspector cards. These are reminders of the actions that each player can take. One player will be the Killer, the other will be the Inspector. The Killer takes the top card of the evidence deck to be his secret identity. The Inspector takes 4 cards to be his starting hand of evidence. The card that you have as your secret identity determines where you're standing on the board. So the Killer, Marion here, is standing in the center and has a reach that will allow her to reach to all of the 8 people around. If the Killer wants to kill somebody, they simply flip over a card that is within their reach without revealing who they actually are. On the Killer's first turn, he must kill a player. So we'll go ahead and choose one of the 8 players and kill them. On the Inspector's turn, the Inspector will take his hand of evidence cards. The Inspector will choose one of the 4 characters in his hand to be his secret identity. We'll take this one. The rest remain in his hand as evidence, people he knows are not the Killer. Now the game proceeds as normal, with each player taking one action out of their 3 available actions. The Killer's actions are to kill, shift, or disguise. Killing works just like we've already seen, choosing a character that's within our reach and flipping it face down. Each time we kill, the Inspector learns something about where we're standing, and if we kill multiple times, the suspect pool narrows down. Now, shift, the second action that's available to the Killer, is to take a row or a column and to shift it 1 space to the left, right, up, or down. So we might take this row and shift. The person who falls off the edge wraps around to the other side. The last action that the Killer can take is called disguise. The Killer draws a card, looks to see if this character is still alive. If it is, he keeps it secretly to himself and eliminates his old identity. Those are the 3 actions that the Killer is able to take. The Inspector, on his turn, can make 3 actions as well, one of 3 actions. The arrest action, he would choose a character who is adjacent to his secret identity and accuse them by saying, "Are you so-and-so?" In this case, "Are you Irma?" The Killer will simply say yes or no. In the case of a yes answer, the Inspector has won the game. In the case of a no answer, the Killer knows a little bit about where the Inspector is standing, one of the 8 people around. The Inspector can also attempt to arrest himself in order to throw off suspicion. The second action that's available to the Inspector is shift, which is identical to the Killer's shift. Choose a row or column, slide it, and the person who falls off goes to the other side. The player doesn't have to be the player's identity does not have to be in the row or column shifted, in either case. Exonerate is the last action that's available to the Inspector. The Inspector draws a card, adds it to his hand of evidence, and then places one face up onto the table, exonerating a suspect. Now the Killer knows one more person who's innocent, and the Inspector knows one more innocent as well. Gameplay continues until either the Killer or Inspector wins the game. If the Killer wins if he can kill the Inspector. The Inspector wins if he successfully accuses the Killer. The Killer also wins if any 16 people on the board are deceased. Now, one final rule: if an entire row or column of individuals become deceased at any time, they fall off the board and the board shrinks. So that's all there is to Killer vs. Inspector, the first game in Noir. The second game in Noir is called Hitman vs. Sleuth. This is a longer game that takes about 20 minutes to play. One player will be the Hitman, who needs to eliminate a set number of suspects in order to win. The other will be the Sleuth, who needs to capture the Hitman in order to win. At the beginning of the game, you create a hit list of the top 4 cards of the deck, revealing only the last character on the hit list. The Hitman also has a secret identity that he'll be using this game. The sleuth begins with a hand of 4 evidence cards. He immediately chooses one of these to be his secret identity. This time we'll choose Marion for the sleuth, and we have Neil as our hitman. The game proceeds immediately following the pattern for Killer versus Inspector, each side taking one action, the other side taking an action from their list of actions, back and forth until one side or the other wins. Right now, our hitman, Neil, can make one of 3 actions. Shift works exactly the same for both sides as in the previous Killer versus Inspector game. Any player can shift any row or any column as usual. Kill. The hitman can kill any person adjacent to him just by flipping them over, just like kill in the first game. If he manages to kill the inspector will discard their roll, choose another card from their hand of evidence, and assume a new identity. Only if the sleuth is completely out of identities to assume will he lose the game. The hitman has a final action called evade, which allows him to gather a new identity. He takes the top 2 cards of the deck, takes one to keep as his secret identity, and discards his old identity, if this person is still alive. Otherwise, the top card is just lost. The second card of the deck he adds to the hit list, making the hit list longer. If the killer manages to kill our target, Geneva here, then she is discarded from the hit list, and the next target becomes visible. If that target is also deceased, due to a previous kill, for example, he would be discarded and another would be revealed, continuing on until we have a live target available to us. The sleuth has 3 actions as well. Shift, as we already mentioned. Investigate, which works very similar to the inspector's investigate, except when the sleuth makes an incorrect investigation, he must discard the blast card from the hit list. A failed investigation can cause the hitman to win the game. Finally, the sleuth can canvass. He will draw a card from his hand, discard a card, making somebody innocent, and then the hitman must say whether or not he is adjacent to the person just exonerated. In this case, Neil would say no. If, for example, I canvassed Ophelia, Neil would have to say yes, he is adjacent to that target. And that is all there is to Sleuth versus Hitman. As soon as the hit list is empty, the sleuth has lost all of his detectives, or if the hitman is captured, the game ends. The third game is called Spy Tag. In this game, 3 or 4 players will play as spies, all using the same basic abilities. Each player has 3 possible actions they can take: shift, capture, and canvas. At the beginning of the game, each player will take a random identity card from the top of the evidence deck. This will be their secret identity, determining where they're standing on the board. A player can shift, just as in the other games, any row or column that he wishes. A player can capture, which is similar to kill or accuse in the other games. You choose an adjacent target or yourself, and you say, is anybody such and such? If any player is, then this character becomes deceased. You capture that player's role as a trophy card, and then that player is dealt a new card from the top of the deck to be their new secret identity. The second new action, Canvas, works very similar. Choose one of the characters adjacent to your character, or your own character, and say, I am canvassing this character. When you canvass Marion, anybody who is in the 8 spaces around Marion, or who is Marion, will have to raise their hand or otherwise acknowledge that they are. Those that are not in this area, that is, would be in the outside of the board, would say no. So this gives us a little bit of information about where everyone else on the board is located. Naturally, whenever you canvass, you'll also be in range of the canvas, so you'll have to acknowledge your presence there. The game proceeds until one of the players captures enough trophies to win. In the 3-player game, you need 4 trophies. In a 4-player game, you need 3 trophies to win. The last game in Noir is called Master Thief versus Chief of Police. In this game, one player will play the Master Thief, attempting to rob all 25 of the suspects, while the Chief of Police will attempt to capture the Master Thief red-handed. To set up the game, place one token of any kind on top of each one of the suspects. Then, the Master Thief takes one card to be her secret identity, two to be reserve identities. The Chief of Police takes one card to be his plainclothes officers, and two face-up cards to be his uniformed officers. These can be placed on the board to make it easier for the player to determine where the uniformed officers stand. Each side has 3 actions they can take, and gameplay goes back and forth with each side taking one action at a time. The Master Thief goes first. In this game, our Master Thief is Simon, and our Chief of Police plainclothes officer is Phoebe, who is... where is she? Oh, here. Alright. So, the Master Thief has 3 available actions. Everyone can both sides can shift, just as in the basic game, shifting a row or column, and the tokens on those cards remain the same when they're shifted. So if we shift this way, the same token stays on each card. The second action that's available to the Chief of Police, or to the Master Thief, is to steal. The Master Thief can steal from somebody who is adjacent to them or who is them. In this case, I could steal from any of the 8 people around me, or from Simon, who I currently am using. So I could announce a steal and take this gem here. The final action I can do is to disguise. To disguise, the Master Thief picks up all 3 of her identities, secretly chooses one, and places it face down. She can choose the same one or a different one from those 3, but she'll only have these 3 available for the entire game. The Chief of Police has 3 actions available as well. He can shift, just as the Master Thief. He can arrest. When the Chief of Police decides to make an arrest by pointing out a target, he can only arrest the Master Thief's current identity. Even if the Master Thief was Simon a minute ago, now that I've changed identities, arresting Simon will have no effect. I can simply say, no, I'm not Simon. But I might be Simon again later. Now, the third action that the Chief of Police can take is to deputize new uniformed officers. He draws a card from the top of the deck and chooses one of his 3 officers to discard. You can discard the one you just drew or one of the other 2. So let's do this one, and we'll get rid of good stuff because he's not too useful right now. When you deputize, the Master Thief gets to choose one token on anybody on the board and take it off. The game proceeds until either the Master Thief is captured red-handed, her current identity gets accused, or until all 25 suspects on the board, including all 3 of the thief's identities, have been robbed. Typically, this game is a little more difficult for the Master Thief to win, and is played for points. So each side takes one turn as the thief, one turn as the Chief of Police, and the highest score wins. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video tutorial, and I hope you have a good time playing Noir. Happy gaming!